everyone, and welcome to Speakers Bank Podcast, Our Voices, Our Views, regular podcast edition. I am Annika, together with my teammates Billy and Georgia from Victoria University, who will be facilitating this episode. Please welcome Nathan, Storm and Kathryn, who are going to discuss about funding. Join us as we explore issues around funding. And so let's get started. Our first question today, team, we were looking at the current funding opportunities that you have. So what are the current funding you use?
We'll start with Storm.
So the current fundings that I use are my disability support pension, my carers allowance, which helps with my mum, and just overall my Centrelink benefits that we all get with a disability. Apart from that, the NDIS is a supported funding, but we usually get that yearly anyway. But I wanted to talk more about the outside of that NDIS, because a lot of people don't really know, or who don't have a disability background know what we can actually claim for. So that's the reason why I wanted to go through that. Getting the required supports payments can be a big struggle, because you've got to put documentation, got to write a note to certain those umbrellas of different people that you've got to go through, different channels. And sometimes what happens is you can get rejected for it, even though you got the evidence and the actual disability to go with it, but they still reject it. So you've got to keep trying multiple times to get what you want. And one of the things that I've learned with getting the right supports is you've got to make it sound like it's a life and death situation. Otherwise, your application will most likely be rejected. So don't write, I've got a disability, but I'm doing this well, I'm doing that well. You've got to write it like it's a tough life, it's a hard life.
Like exaggerate.
And even though, you know, in life you're not meant to tell a lie, but this is a good lie. This is a lie to help you in your everyday endeavours. So it's very, very important.
I mean, Storm, though, at the end of the day, you don't really need to lie. What I've been told is the best way to, you know, get money from the NDIS, like if you need funding, is to basically, not only should you get a comprehensive report that speaks basically all the NDIS lingo. So basically they use very, very academic language. You've got to use very specific wording, even in a review. So, for example, instead of saying, you know, for example, I want, you've got to say, for example, I need this item in order to function. The other thing is that people highly recommend, and I've found this very, very good, is that you basically paint a picture of your worst day. It doesn't matter if in the review or the day the report's written you feel on top of your game. You've got to basically tell them about your worst day and focus on that.
Tim, what we'll do, so that sounds as though that's a few of the challenges that could come with the funding side of things. We will also be covering funding challenges or barriers, loopholes, things like that. Did Nathan or Kathryn, you two want to talk about perhaps the funding that you receive at the moment?
Ladies first.
I'm with the I've got the NDIS funding. I get funded that for a support worker. I also get funded for like activities I do, which is important in your life, you know. I get funding to see like a psychologist and that, which is very important as well. So NDIS covers with a lot of those expenses. And and I also have the disability pension, and anything that supports disability I've got, because even though you're so independent, but deep down you're not that independent to a mainstream. You do need the support to help you be independent, basically. Yeah. So when you apply for like NDIS and that, yes, you do have to exaggerate. You got to, as I say to people, you've got to act dumb to get the support. Because you say, oh, yes, I can do that. I can do this.
Yeah.
It's not going to help. It's going to
And
make
people
life.
Yeah, and people often say focus on what you can't do as well.
Yeah, focus on what you can't do. Yeah, so I'm very happy that I've got that, whatever. And yeah.
Well, what about you, Nathan?
Sure. So in terms of me, the NDIS has obviously given me, the opportunity to have, intense physiotherapy and occupational therapy, which I've needed for years. But it's also opened up opportunities for more equipment to better help me get around the house. Recently, I was able to receive a new wheelchair, an updated recliner that would help with posture support and things like that. They even actually funded an electronic bed for me so that I could basically be better able to sleep and climb into bed, because I also suffer quite a lot of heartburn, which can be very nasty. And when you have lung issues and having CP, if you have heartburn and that gets into your lungs, it can destroy them.
So I'll elaborate a bit more with Nathan's like bed. I've also got the same sort of problem, but not with the heartburn. See, with cerebral palsy, when we sleep, our muscles get very, very tight, and whatever reason, how long we sleep, our muscles get really, really tight in that certain area. Whether it's if we sleep on our side or sleep on our back muscles will get sore. And if we sleep on our side, the shoulder gets sore. So we've got to somehow manage the pain barrier, but also feel comfortable when we're sleeping. So it is a very, very difficult thing to manage. And a lot of the time we go to the physio just because we've got too much neck pain because of the sleeping. Because I've got a strained neck at the moment for my bad sleeping habits, because I've been trying to sleep in a certain position and my body just didn't like it. And that's what I've been experiencing. And I totally agree with what Nathan was saying about getting the right bed is very, very important.
And I think it's not just about that, Storm. Like to give you a very quick overview, when I first got the current, queen bed that I have, my OT was basically, let's just say he somehow failed OT school, to put it that way, and basically. Anytime I wanted a major piece of equipment, it was like, oh, I don't know if we can. So he basically showed us an option for a bed just where the back and the feet, go up and down. But after a couple of years of using it, my wife and I have found, well, actually, no, what you really need is we need, a queen size bed with a Presocare mattress where it's also high-low, as well as, enabling me to sit up and put my feet up for, circulation and muscle reasons. So it's one of those things where if you're going to get a major piece of AT funded, you really need the right person to do that.
The job. Yeah.
Because generally speaking, and this is where, different, I guess, loopholes and things come in, is that generally speaking, for major pieces of AT, the NDIS want it to last between 5 and 7 years. However, if you're able to show that for whatever reason your piece of equipment particularly needs updating and you can show that you are in absolute need for it, there are some ways to get the NDIS to allow you to have funding to upgrade your equipment. But it's very, very rare. So I wouldn't suggest that anyone, rush out and go, I want a new whatever it is, because at the end of the day, you have to make a really, really good case for it.
I think that covers our funding support quite well. What you're all receiving at this time. What was our next question? Who wants to take the next one?
I'll take the next one.
You'll do the next one?
So, what are the current funding issues that we're all facing at the moment?
What are the current?
I was just going to ask, which will probably be close to that question anyway, it might expand from that. Just in regards to your funding, do you don't advocate on your own behalf? Is there someone in between yourselves and NDIS?
Correct.
Support coordinators or case management that you have? Or?
Correct. I've got a support coordinator.
Mm-hmm.
So whatever I need, I sit down with my coordinator and my disability support manager, who is responsible for helping me with my money issues, with making sure I don't go over the limit with my funding.
Mm-hmm.
And we sit down, we have a meeting every year, and we go through what has worked, what hasn't worked during the year with my funding. And then if you're really, really good and you present well and you present your case well and you've got a good support coordinator, then you should be able to get the funding you need.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm very, very lucky in the sense that I've got a good support coordinator and a good support team that whatever I say, that they can make it 10 times as worse as it can possibly get. Because I'm not really a type of person that likes to milk stuff, but the support team understands that you need to milk it to get what you need.
Mm-hmm.
So it's very, very important that if you're not satisfied with your support coordinator or your disability support person that's in charge of your funding, if you are plan managed, you need to find the correct people for that, because if you don't get those right supports, then you're not going to get the right amount of funding that you deserve.
Yeah, I think people need to think of, support coordinators, whether you're going to appeal a decision or just go for a view. I think people need to think of support coordinators as lawyers. So the way I like to think of it is, if you're going to go into, say, what do they call it in legal terms? Like mediation before you go to court, or like arbitration. You want a really good lawyer to get the best deal possible before you have to go to court. So you want a really good lawyer. You don't want someone that goes, oh, well, let's see what happens.
Yeah.
Each of you have case managers who help you with these? With the
Sorry?
So each of you have a case manager for funding and things like that, or?
I know that I have a support coordinator, but when I first signed up for the NDIS, I'd moved to Queensland, so I had nobody around me. And what I learned very, very quickly was that you basically need someone to help represent you and help coach you with all the terminology and everything like that, because at the end of the day, for the first couple of years of my plan, at least up until probably a few months ago, I'd been screwing myself out of so much funding. I mean, I started off with a $50,000 plan that was very, very minimal, and now I think I've got a plan, in at least around 140,000. And it's all about basically, how you paint, the picture and what you tell them and how you tell them it.
Mm-hmm. So it's almost
I've got a case manager as well, but I don't think we call them case managers anymore. There's another word for it. I think we call them support
coordinator.
Yeah, correct. We call them support coordinators, and they're very, very important, because if we can't attend that meeting for the local coordinator, they're the ones that represent us. So they know our disability history, what we need, and what we currently receive as disability support, such as our disability pension and things like that. So very, very important. And I've learned this very quickly, that if you don't know the system and how the NDIS works, you need to get people around you that do know how it works. because otherwise you're not going to get the full benefits, is what Nathan said earlier. And we're not really in the ideal sort of system to understand, because there's a lot of jargon. I remember the first time I read the NDIS, and this was ages ago, it was about 400 to 500 pages of the NDIS and how it works, and my mind just got absolutely destroyed at reading all those paragraphs and understanding it. So my feedback to them was, can you just create a diagram or a drawing of what it's supposed to be? That way we can sort of understand on a basic level. I know we're not going to be able to understand the full version of it, but if you could just give us a bit of diagrams and a bit of like an easier format to read it, then we should be okay. And if any questions or concerns, we can always go to the coordinator to help us out with that.
I think half the problem is, though, Storm, with regard to the NDIS, is that things change so often that nobody at the NDIS really knows what's current, and even then you don't get notified. So to give you a very quick example, I had level 3 transport funds that were paid into my bank account, and for over at least a year I'd been for review at least once or twice before my last one. And nobody questioned the fact that I had level 3. My wife and I looked at the conditions, and it basically said, if you're unable to take, public transport, then, you get the full amount, either that or, you need to be, studying or doing something for 15 hours a week. Mm-hmm. When I finally said to this person at my current review, I'm no longer studying 15 hours a week, I've had to drop that for mental health issues, they basically dropped me down. They wanted to drop me down to a level 1 transport fund, but luckily, because I'm a public speaker, that technically I can have level 2, should COVID ever ease off and I can do, in-person gigs and things. So it's really one of those things where they don't notify participants of changes. You kind of just find out on the fly.
Yeah, I mean, a previous podcast that we did on the NDS, and you will see it soon, hopefully, is that we, as a panel, Kathryn, Nathan, and myself, only found out about a government sort of like a reform about the NDS sort of system where they were going to put independent assessments instead of the usual going to your coordinator and doing that sort of system that's been working very well. We didn't know that until we were researching the whole podcast for that topic. So we were left in the dark.
Yeah.
All 3 of us didn't get notified at all from our support coordinator or anything like that. So we were never told at the time of the recording that we were in that situation. So it was very, very scary. And luckily now, and at this point of time in this podcast, we can safely say that this independent assessment has been put on hold by the government. So we're very, very lucky at the moment.
I will say, though, when you look at the NDIS in the grand scheme of things, although there are plenty of positives. Now, I don't know if Storm and Kathryn remember this, but back years ago, and I say years ago, it's probably about 5 or so years ago, we had a seminar that was set up by Speakers Bank at this particular town hall, and we had someone from the NDIS or somewhere in that sphere come out and actually talk to us about the NDIS and what it was going to look like when it launched. And they said to us very clearly, none of your Centrelink payments, when you get NDIS, nothing will basically change. Essentially, the NDIS will fund anything you need as long as it relates directly back to your disability and it's reasonable and necessary. Basically, she made it seem like it was basically a blank check and you could have whatever you want, provided that, it met the requirements. And one of my questions in particular was about, what's going to happen to my mobility allowance? I use it for transport. And she basically said to me, you'll have the option of keeping it as part of your Centrelink funds or you can have it put, injected straight into your NDIS plan to give you, additional funds there. And I said, oh, that sounds great. I cut to a few months later when I go to sign up for the NDIS, and I'm basically being informed that the moment my plan goes through, I'm going to lose, $98 when a fortnight when money was already tight, even when I was getting the full rate of pension. Like, it was just, it does, misinformation can also have knock-on effects with your own personal finances, because you don't get told, hey, this is going to change. The way I like to talk to people about this, Storm, is to basically say, the NDIS isn't what I was sold it to be. It's kind of like if you go to a car dealership and they make it seem like, you can pay off this car or this item interest-free, and they'll throw in all these extras, and then you go to purchase it and find out, your bill's twice as big as, it was, you were initially sold it, and the car's probably not as good as what it was advertised to be. That's what I look at the NDIS like.
Yeah,
it's still good. It's still good, but it's not as good as we were sold it.
I think the big problem with the NDIS, I think everyone can relate to this, is the amount of non-flexibility it gives you. For example, when you're living in a COVID situation and you can't go anywhere, you can't go to the football, you can't go to, your normal sort of like areas that you normally go to, that sort of funding area that helps you go to these certain places that you want to go to, say for a music concert or something like that, you can't even use it.
No.
So my suggestion would be is, why can't we just move that funding that you can't even use and put it into your physiotherapy or your osteotherapy or whatever therapies you use. That way you don't have to worry about, oh, am I going to miss out on a session because I've used too much, because in the pandemic I've had to go twice instead of once every week. Or I've had to go 3 times because my body just can't deal with the pain because we just haven't had enough exercise.
And another thing is, like, in the pandemic, you are entitled to get more support for your well-being.
Yeah.
So NDIS should be paying for that instead of, your activities that you're missing out on. And it's distressing for a lot of people, especially those that can't quite understand what is happening.
Sounds like it would be interesting if you're able to transfer those funds from one specific use purpose to another when you can't use it for that reason.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's another thing.
Yeah.
Like, if you're in a situation like we are at the moment, that's another thing you could probably speak to your provider about.
Yeah,
and just like an idea. It may not work, but...
Yeah, and the other thing would be too, is that the NDIS is not flexible in terms of treatments. So they will suggest you to do physio, but for me, I like a combination of osteotherapy and physiotherapy. But the thing is, the NDIS won't recognise osteotherapy as a treatment. So it means that you cannot use your funding pool for your osteotherapy because the NDIS doesn't recognise it as a therapy for your disability. And I just think it's absolute rubbish, and it just needs to change.
Yeah.
And I get what you're saying, Storm. Like, for example, the NDIS won't recognise exercise physiology,
exactly
for
the
example,
same. Yeah.
Because purely, I'm just trying to gather my thoughts. Purely because it's classed as exercise, not therapy. But the reality is, even when I go to my exercise physiologist who has, physiotherapists on board, they still bill it anyway out of my physiotherapy funds. Not only that, but it's technically cheaper. So my point being is, on every level, the NDIS is not consistent. So, for example, they're all about wanting to be as cheap as possible, but they won't fund an exercise physiologist even if it's cheaper. I mean, at the end of the day, if you especially have health and well-being in your plan, you should be able to see, an exercise physiologist, once, twice, maybe 3 times a week, even if it's a way for someone to, better their own mental health, because there's plenty of studies that tell us that exercise is not only great for you physically, but it's good for you mentally. The other thing, and I think, Storm, you might find this quite comical, particularly. I went to Plan Partners, for example, because I wanted to purchase a weighted blanket, just myself, because in previous plans we were just able to go buy one under consumables. Now, plan partner said to me, okay, well, you need a letter from the OT just to get a 3 kg, single weighted blanket. Got that, all good. But then the funny thing was, under my consumables as well, I wanted to get one of those, hot water, I don't know what you call them, like those hot water things that you have in workplaces that you can use instead of a kettle.
Oh, yes, those taps.
Yeah. One of those. Yeah. So I went on to Catch, got one of those, basically explained it to plan partners. No problems, even though I'm handling boiling water. Don't get me wrong, I can absolutely handle it, and I'm safe with it, and I could justify it. But the funny thing was, okay, you need the letter for the weighted blanket that's 3 kg and couldn't hurt you, but we'll based on your verbal approval, we don't need a support letter, even though the hot water tap, heats water up to 100 degrees or more, but we'll give it to you because it is technically part of meal preparation. No questions asked, and we'll reimburse it. Don't get me wrong, I am grateful that they did that, but at the same time, you can see the logic of where that doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
Well, we'll use that for a nice jumping off point. I think, Billy, didn't you have a question?
No, I'm good.
That's what I was thinking. We've covered a few concerns and loopholes, challenges you've faced with funding. What I think it would be nice to wrap up with was, were there any opportunities or supports from funding that NDIS has provided that you've found helpful? Or
definitely. Getting a proper OT, that was definitely one of the biggest things that they've given me. But also finding the right support people and understanding that when you have a disability and you have special needs, you need to find the right support network around you to help you in life.
You do.
I think that's what the NDIS has taught me, because with our personalities, and I'm sure Kathryn and Nathan will help me on this one, is that we're very, very stubborn people, and we don't really say, oh, we might need a bit of help here. We sort of just don't speak up when we need to speak up sometimes. Yeah. And I think the NDIS has given us the freedom to give us a way to express our feelings and our thoughts, and not be scared to come out and say, we need help.
Yeah.
Like for an example, when someone like us says to you, can you help me? And the response you might get, yeah, sure, what would you like help with? Asking help is different than just asking for help, because our needs need a specific level of help. Mm-hmm. And I could ask a silly question like, if you don't understand what special needs is, and someone asks a silly question like, can you read this out to me? Like, I can read, but I can't process the question unless it's read out to me. Mm-hmm. Like, people with learning difficulties need that little bit more help. And like for me, how I learn is someone will read it and I'll verbalize it. I'll answer it verbally. And then after I answered it, I will write it down. So that's the kind of how my needs work in there, which is good. What else? Yeah.
What about you, Nathan?
I think in terms of opportunities, it's definitely given me a little bit more freedom, I guess, around the house and out and about in in my local community, in terms of, having a wheelchair that I can use, and having, a bed that I can sleep in, and a Phoenix chair that I can, utilize to sit in the lounge room and, get dressed and everything like that. I think now it's more about, getting the NDIS to give me the opportunity to have SDA, because what I find the NDIS is really good with, they're great with giving people opportunities in terms of, you know, physical therapy equipment, but the really hard thing that especially I'm finding at the moment is, as we talked about, you know, in another podcast, was to get the housing to put all that equipment in.
What I really, really, really need at the moment is I need the NDIS to understand that the exercise physiology should be a completely different sort of like funding umbrella, and it needs to be a separate, because an exercise physiologist and a physio are completely two different things. So an exercise physiologist, we describe them as our personal trainers at a gym, but they're more on a disability level, so they can do things that a personal trainer cannot do. Where we, when we have a disability, those sort of like big weights that personal trainers do, that's not necessarily what helps us. What necessarily helps us is a normal weight that we can do normal reps with. We don't need to lift like 15 kilos or 20, maybe even 5. We can just lift like 5 or 10 kilos.
Yeah.
But they're very, very good exercise physiologists, because they understand that here's a person that might need to strengthen in this area in terms of like my legs, for example. And what the personal trainers will do is that they'll try to put on muscle rather than strengthen my legs. So there's a big difference between strengthening it and putting muscle. I don't want to put extra muscle on my leg. I want to strengthen it. I don't want to be one of those bodybuilders. Sorry. That you do your competitions with. I just want someone that's going to help me with my everyday needs, to get me stronger, to walk around the house and not be in pain. But I really need the NDIS to change their thought process about what is the correct treatment and what is not what is the right treatment. Sorry.
Because the really funny thing is Storm, and this is what I find almost hilarious, in that the NDIS has no problems funding a personal trainer for, say, $98 an hour, hypothetically, while you fork out for the gym membership or go to their studio, which might have very basic, and I'm talking almost archaic equipment. But then, you know, it's like, we'll fork out $190 something for a physio, but the exercise physiologist, who's probably the best of both worlds, at least in my own opinion, you know, and is probably, you know, more expensive than a personal trainer, but a lot less expensive than a physio, that they go, oh, we won't fund that. But it's like the exercise physiologist has actually studied, you know, exercise physiology. They may not be a physiotherapist, but they know about walking patterns. Like, you know, you hire a personal trainer, they don't know about, you know, they don't necessarily know about your disability or know about you know what a good walking pattern is. Like, for example, my exercise physiologist, he may not be a physiotherapist, and he'll refer to the one that he works with if he's not sure on something. But ultimately, like, he understands gait training, he understands, you know, muscle strengthening, how my disability actually works for the most part.
Yeah, because
you know, a personal trainer is not going to understand that.
Yeah, because
guys, what we're going to do too is our next session we will be covering supports and things like that. So I did want to say thank you to you, Storm, Nate, and Kathryn, for taking part in this conversation today, and we did learn a lot from it. I think my key takeaways today was, 1, there's always funding available for you, but 2, having the right supports and support coordinators to advocate on your behalf is super important in terms of funding, to just ensure you're getting what you're entitled to and what you need for yourself. And so that does tie in well with our next topic, which will be support. So tune into that. And as much as we'd like to carry on the conversation, our podcast episode has come to an end. So again, on behalf of Speakers Bank, thank you very much, Storm, Nathan, and Kathryn, for sharing your insights about this topic. And thank you for everyone watching. If you have any questions or suggestions for any topics or anything like that, you can contact us on 03 9687 7066 or visit www.speakersbank.org.au. And this is Annika together with my teammates Georgia and Billy saying thank you once again. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel and follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram and LinkedIn. Have a great day. Keep safe, everyone. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.